Britain is in the midst of a monumental extended political crisis.
Stop Brexit!
And now the starting gun has been fired on what could be the most bitter and toxic general election in living memory. But this election isn't just a battle between the two main leaders. Both have at their shoulders powerful advisors who sit outside the traditional mainstream of the parties.
Hiring, firing, promotion, that whole system needs to be swept away.
Meet Dominic Cummings, Boris Johnson's chief strategist.
Are you confident of winning a general election?
Even some allies said he was unfit to work in number 10.
I said to Boris, you know, no Dominic.
Why?
Because of the collateral damage.
And meet Cummings Milne, the most influential figure in Jeremy Corbyn's leadership team.
Morning, Jeremy.
Dissent and chaos is often something that Seamus likes.
Tonight, are these unelected aides pulling the strings at the top of the Conservative and Labour parties?
Go, 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 go!
And if these are the people shaping our politics as we go into this election, where do they want to take us?
Both party leaders have chosen people who hate the British state. Both of them basically want to smash it up.
This is Dominic Cummings, Boris Johnson's chief aide and so-called Svengali. He's no fan of the Tories and claims he's never been a member of the party.
People think, by the way, and I think most people are right, the Tory party is run by people who basically don't care about people like me.
He's a self-styled disruptor who believes in picking political fights.
Right, so everyone watching at home should know, don't watch the news, because it's almost all bullshit.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Former boss of Vote Leave.
The bastion of independence.
The campaign was found to have broken electoral law.
Did you get it wrong, Mr. Cummings?
And he was severely criticised in a parliamentary inquiry into fake news.
What is truly contemptible and what is cowardly is Dominic Cummings refusing to give evidence to a select committee and being in contempt of Parliament.
Dominic Cummings was also implicated in the unlawful advice given to the Queen.
Was it the Prime Minister or was the instruction from the Special Advisor, Dominic Cummings?
This weekend, Labour added to the questions, asking if Dominic Cummings had full security clearance after a whistleblower came forward with concerns about contacts Mr. Cummings made when he worked in Russia, setting up an airline in the 1990s. Weeks in office, Dominic Cummings proved he didn't just have authority over other special advisors, but over a holder of one of the highest offices of state, the Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Sonia Khan was questioned about government leaks by Boris Johnson's senior advisor Dominic Cummings. She was dismissed and escorted out of Downing Street by a police officer after having her security clearance removed.
The Chancellor has described his relationship with Boris Johnson as fantastic. That's despite the Prime Minister's senior advisor Dominic Cummings sacking one of Sajid Javid's top aides without warning.
And it's not only special advisors, but also ministers said to be in the firing line of Dominic Cummings.
Dominic Cummings doesn't tell you what to do.
No.
Are you and your colleagues a bit scared of him, though?
No.
You stand up to him, do you?
I have a total agreement with the Prime Minister.
Dominic Cummings was not part of Boris Johnson's leadership campaign team, but a very late hiring made on Dominic Cummings' terms. It was only a couple of days before he went into 10 Downing Street that Boris Johnson hired Dominic Cummings. Boris Johnson was a man in need of strategy, and Dominic Cummings was never short of that. Dominic Cummings insisted if he was to have the job, he must have it with full authority to run the number 10 machine. But if Boris Johnson was in any doubt about appointing Dominic Cummings, one of the key voices that persuaded him was Carrie Symonds, his partner. Boris Johnson's former Chief of Staff as London Mayor is now an independent MP, Nick Bowles.
Boris himself is never the source of an idea, let alone, complex plans or strategies or any of that. That's not who he is, it's not how his brain operates. I think that he has taken the decision, there's only one man who can do this, that's Dom. Let's get Dom, and then give Dom everything he asked for, so that Dom then says yes, and then let's do what Dom recommends.
September, and it's Tory party conference. How worried are Conservatives that Dominic Cummings is accused of defying the law, pouring petrol on deep divisions in Brexit Britain, and splitting the Conservative Party?
Let's get Brexit done. We can, we must, and we will.
Dominic Cummings was said to be behind the sacking of 21 MPs after they supported the vote to block no deal. I caught up with one of them, David Gork. Can I ask you, who do you think is really in charge in Downing Street as you watch the operation at the moment?
Well, I think that's a very, very good question. I mean, it seems to be a strategy that is sort of led by Dominic Cummings. So he seems to be the key figure. But look, the buck stops with the Prime Minister. So ultimately, the Prime Minister is always in charge.
But it's not his kind of tone of governance we're seeing, is it? It feels like someone else's.
Yes, I think that's right. I don't think some of the confrontational language is exactly his natural form.
Well,
I
the
agree with
tactics.
that.
Do you think you'd still be a Conservative MP if it wasn't for Dominic Cummings?
Quite possibly. Yeah, quite possibly.
But is Dominic Cummings not only an enforcer, but also pulling the strings? At Tory conference, no one's going there. Is Dominic Cummings running this government?
Morning, Gary.
A lot of people think it's Dominic Cummings who's actually running the government.
No, that's not correct.
Is it Dominic Cummings or Boris Johnson who's running the government right now, would you say?
Boris Johnson's running the government. Dominic Cummings is a very talented advisor that's supporting him.
He's not a member of the party. Does he believe in many of the party's central creeds?
He certainly believes in Brexit.
Underdressed to impress, the man everyone was talking about kept a low profile at Tory conference. But his influence was everywhere on display. Look around the Conservative Party conference, you might think this is a party morphing into the Vote Leave campaign. The issue of Brexit merging with issues like spending money on the NHS. A sure sign of who's pulling the strings. During the referendum campaign, Dominic Cummings used to talk about what he and Boris Johnson would do with others if the referendum result brought them into Downing Street. Now, with many Vote Leave figures brought into government 3.5 years later, he's trying to put those plans into action. Labour MP Jess Phillips recently met Dominic Cummings at number 10. You've gone to see Dominic Cummings in Downing Street because you're concerned about the tone of the political debate. But he doesn't refer to the Conservative Party's policies or even the government's policies.
He never, ever once referred to himself as the government. He constantly referred to himself and what was going on and the things I was talking about as vote leave. He was like, well, vote leave this, vote leave, don't want this, vote leave. And I said to him at one point, I've come into number 10 Downing Street to speak about the governance of this country. To be in number 10 and for it to be being referred to as vote leave is unusual.
But he wasn't name-checking the Conservative Party or the government?
Oh, no, he doesn't like the Conservative Party, does he? I mean, that's no secret.
You acknowledge that you have at the heart of the Conservative Party's strategy right now a man who doesn't really think the party necessarily needs to exist. How did we get here?
We got here because the Remain side of the political class wouldn't accept the public result. That's why we're here, and that's why Dominic Cummings is needed.
Jeremy Corbyn also works with an aide who shares Dominic Cummings' passion for drastic change, but who operates with a very different style. Cummings Milne, Labour's Director of Strategy and Communications. James Mills was an advisor to Jeremy Corbyn and to the Shadow Chancellor, John McDonnell.
The way I look at Seamus is that he's sort of a very traditional sort of English intellectual. He's from that sort of left intelligentsia that you used to get in the left. I mean, I've always described him as sort of feline in nature. He sort of glides into a room more than anything else. Sometimes he'll come into a meeting and he'll come in from the side entrance and sit at the back. Some people would probably think that he was being sort of aloof and, you know, but it's just his nature.
He glides into a room sort of silently. You suddenly look round and he's there.
Yeah, he just sort of glides in.
Seamus Milne has been accused of putting out deliberately confusing messages and statements in the Labour leader's office.
I get the feeling that dissent and chaos is often something that Seamus likes. He likes a battle.
He's a disruptor, a revolutionary.
Yeah, that's what it feels like. It feels like disruption is the end goal. And that's why sometimes when these briefings will go out, Jeremy Corbyn will say one thing, the vast majority of members of Parliament in the Labour Party feel one way, and it seems like Jeremy thinks that. And then all of a sudden, there's like 3 different other views being put out in the media or on the front bench. Now, he's in charge of media, and I can't help but think that they just enjoy the idea of the ambiguity of chaos.
A former Guardian columnist, Seamus Milne cuts a quieter figure than Dominic Cummings. He isn't known for abrasive, sweary language, nor is he tempted by the microphones thrust at him.
Mr. Milne, Channel 4 News. What's going to happen next?
But like his opposite number, he's outside the main traditions of his party, especially when it comes to foreign policy.
ISIS is the Frankenstein monster of the war on terror. It is a direct product of aggression, occupation, divide and rule sectarianism, and support of dictatorship by the United States, Britain and their allies.
More recently, Seamus Milne has also been accused of interfering with anti-Semitism disputes within the party itself, something he has denied.
What's your message to Jewish Labour MPs, Mr. Corbyn?
He thinks the West is behind most of the world's ills. It's not a mainstream Labour tradition, that.
I'll be fair to you, I think in recent times, no.
Do you think there's a bit of British foreign policy since the Second World War that Seamus Milne has supported?
I mean, I'm pretty sure the East Timor crisis was something they definitely supported. I mean,
but we might be at the end of the list.
I mean, I'm an economic expert in
He's not mainstream Labour in that sense, is he?
You come from that tradition in the Labour Party that did view that was very anti-imperialist, Western imperialism.
When it comes to the EU, Seamus Milne also holds views that are contrary to many of Labour's MPs and members. Most of Jeremy Corbyn's senior shadow cabinet members are Remainers, but Seamus Milne is a consistent critic of the EU.
I imagine Seamus is naturally a Brexiteer anyway, because, you know, the idea of Europe being a business arrangement, a trade deal. I can only assume that he knows Brexit will be bad, but that it will make the working classes rise up in dissent.
But Labour's Brexit stance has been attacked as muddled and confusing. The agreed policy is to renegotiate with the EU and have a second referendum, with no decision yet made on how they'll campaign in that referendum. But the majority of members want Labour to be unequivocally a party of Remain, including the deputy leader, Tom Watson.
The simple truth is, whatever anyone says, that Labour is a Remain party.
I'm working, don't disturb me.
At Labour Party conference, these tensions spiralled when Carrie Murphy, another of Mr Corbyn's close circle of advisers and an ally of Seamus Milne's, was said to be part of a plot to unseat Tom Watson.
Does Tom Watson have your full confidence? Tom Watson is the deputy leader of the party, and I enjoy working with him.
The party itself has been ruptured, with Brexit the main force driving it apart. Jeremy Corbyn is insisting he won't pick a side on that. Mr Watson is pushing him to come off the fence and wholeheartedly back remaining in the EU.
So how much has Labour's bumble around Brexit been down to Seamus Milne? Unite boss Len McCluskey, who's been seen as a major influence on Labour policy himself, has been a friend and ally of Seamus Milne's for many years. A lot of Labour MPs, including shadow cabinet members, say they think we would have moved more quickly to a more pro-Remain position in the Labour Party if it hadn't been for Seamus Milne pulling Jeremy Corbyn back again and again.
I absolutely don't believe for 1 second that he's been pulled in any particular direction.
The suggestion was that Keir Starmer was sort of gently walking him across the road he didn't really want to walk, and Seamus Milne pulled him back.
That might be a suggestion that you've heard from Keir or from others who have a view about Remain. That is not my observation of what Jeremy Corbyn wanted.
Mr. Corbyn, why haven't you signed up to a second referendum?
Good evening, nice to see you all, thank you.
Dispatches has learned that earlier this year, senior Labour figures thought Jeremy Corbyn was about to turn Labour into a party of Remain. This summer, John McDonnell and Diane Abbott told Jeremy Corbyn they needed to have a serious chat with him about Brexit away from Westminster. They met at Jeremy Corbyn's allotment. At that meeting, the three of them agreed Labour would move to an unequivocally pro-Remain position, and Jeremy Corbyn would write an article saying just that. The article was written, but at the last minute, several sources say Seamus Milne persuaded Jeremy Corbyn not to go ahead with it. Something Labour has denied. Coming up, how might the leader's henchmen influence the election and shape Britain afterwards?
Is a chicken a bird? Is it classed as a bird?
Is
a chicken classed as a bird?
It's got wings.
No, but would you class it as a bird?
Yeah.
First Dates, Tuesday at 10 on Channel 4.
Tonight, Dispatches is looking at the role of the two main leaders' top advisers in the general election and the never-ending Brexit crisis. As storms swirl over Westminster, many are wondering what happens next and what is the end goal of Boris Johnson's strategist, Dominic Cummings. Whether in government or during the referendum campaign, Dominic Cummings doesn't always like to play by the rules of the system. He's communicated stark messages about Brexit, even when their accuracy is contested.
I am queasy about certain things which he is not queasy about. I don't really like doubling down on controversy, but Dominic doesn't worry about it. So the bus was the obvious example. We've got a message, we need to get the message out. If people are daft enough to keep talking about the thing we're forcing them to talk about, well then let's do it. That's where Dominic would come from.
The rebel instincts of Dominic Cummings were clear to friends in his university days.
So this is our college yearbook, Exeter College yearbook from 91 to 92. And here he is, looking very smart, probably the smartest that anyone has ever seen Dom look. Dom was part of a clique of boys within the group called the Wastrels, sort of slightly set apart, and they would go out, they would drink together. Their motto was, there are no rules, fear is unknown, sleep was out of the question. I think that for Dom, it was about sort of pushing the boundaries and seeing how far they could take things. There was no kind of sense that Dom was bound by tradition or, you know, had any interest in sort of, you know, keeping the status quo.
That early appetite for disruption has stayed with Dominic Cummings. I met up with former Vote Leave staff member Nick Connor below the tower where Vote Leave worked during the referendum.
It was absolute tip. The roof was falling in, water kept coming down. It was a rubbish office. We didn't have any resources. The computers were old, nothing quite worked. We used to have fire alarms and evacuate all the time. Everyone used to leave the office apart from Dom.
He'd just sit there through alarms.
Yeah, yeah.
Normal rules don't apply.
Yeah, yeah, you know, go down, captain going down for a ship, you know.
Well done, well done. Right about the puppies.
Last year, Channel 4 turned the story of the Vote Leave campaign into a TV movie, with Benedict Cumberbatch playing Dominic Cummings as a mercurial mastermind.
All right, team, listen up.
Oh, yeah, he looks like Dom there.
Really does begin. You double down, hit him again and again.
We were the upstarts taking on the elites.
The revolution?
We were the revolution. It was us versus the world. I would imagine guys working for Apple in the 80s when it was Apple versus IBM. You know, it was that sort of battle, taking on the big boys, taking on the establishment.
But now he's in the establishment.
He's in the establishment.
He's at the heart of it.
Yeah, and he's changed it from in. You can't say that people in Westminster are happy with him. They don't like him. He doesn't like them because he's a man for change. Vote Leave was Dom. We saw it the night we won, where we all called for his name.
What's the moment like?
I can't actually remember the actual words. I just remember, yes, you know, this is it.
This mobile phone footage captured Dominic Cummings' speech at Vote Leave's victory celebrations.
What are we doing? This is your victory. Yeah. You guys did this.
Dominic Cummings' unorthodox approach to campaigning would have a lasting impact on British politics.
And he smashed the board above him.
And we think we can make it better, don't we? Yeah. We can turn this thing around, I can tell.
But while Dominic Cummings was instrumental in Vote Leave's success, some Brexiteers who knew him from the campaign warned Boris Johnson during the Tory leadership contest not to appoint him to a senior role. It was said that you asked, could he guarantee he wouldn't take Dominic Cummings into number 10?
And I said to Boris, you know, no Dominic.
Why?
Because of the collateral damage. Dominic is a person willing to do what is necessary to win.
But he'll be ruthless, more ruthless than some.
Well, I've been accused of being ruthless, but I still seek to... I'm always looking towards reconciliation. I'd always like, even for the most hysterical lefty, to come and be reconciled and admit we're all good chaps together.
Whereas Dominic Cummings...
I'm not sure Dominic is always looking for the reconciliation afterwards.
How are you doing? Nice to see you all.
Cummings Milne is also seen by some as bent on disrupting British politics. And when it comes to influencing Jeremy Corbyn and shaping Labour Party policy, Cummings Milne is said to have an extremely powerful role.
The reason you have close advisors is so that those close advisors can impart particular views to a leader. But the idea that, oh, it's Cummings Milne or any of his other close staff who then say, no, you mustn't do that. This is an image that tries to project Jeremy as a weak leader, an indecisive leader, and it's just not true.
It's the vote before Christmas, Britain's first December election in nearly a century and the most unpredictable in a lifetime.
The general election is now up and running, an election shaped and determined by Brexit and the vital role of these two special advisors.
It does seem to me that on both sides of this particular fence, whether it be those in the background in the Conservative Party or the Labour Party, that disruption and chaos is very fertile ground. Brexit offers something almost delicious to those people.
Like Cummings Milne.
Yeah, I mean, I have no idea what his own personal views are on Brexit, but sometimes it feels that they want the Tories to deliver a bad Brexit so that people will rise up against them.
As for Dominic Cummings, if Boris Johnson wins a majority at the election and he stays at the Prime Minister's side, Dominic Cummings wants to change the way government works beyond recognition.
So I think the concept of the permanent civil service is a concept that should be binned. I think it itself is the problem. Hiring, firing, promotion, that whole system needs to be swept away.
Dominic Cummings has talked of cutting the Whitehall civil service to 1/5 of its current size and wanting to get experts running departments instead of amateurish MPs.
Dominic, I think, undoubtedly looks forward to the day when those who govern the country as ministers are expertly qualified to do the extremely important job that they do, rather than it being the next person's turn.
Didn't get Brexit done, did you?
As we go into a critical general election, two anti-establishment revolutionaries have extraordinary influence over our two main party leaders. They give rock-solid confidence where the leaders might have doubts. And on all the big calls that have to be made, many think it's Cummings Milne and Dominic Cummings who are calling the shots.
I think it is interesting that Both party leaders have chosen to entrust most of the important decisions to people who fundamentally hate everything about the British state. Both of them basically want to smash it up. That is very curious, to have a revolutionary not just advising the far-left leader of the Labour Party, but also the hard-right leader of the Conservative Party.